Motion is May 30th, 2024. It is now 5:00 p.m. and I call this public hearing to order. For the record, in accordance with state statutes, tonight's petition was advertised in the town clerk's office, advertised in the Connecticut Post. I will now invite members of the public who have signed up to speak to make their comments. Each member of the public will be provided 3 minutes to speak. Please announce your name and address before speaking. Is there anybody who would like to speak? Is there anybody who would like to speak? Is there anybody who would like to speak? I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close.
Okay, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. As listed on the agenda, immediately following the public hearing, we were going to go into our regular scheduled meeting, or special meeting, I should call it. So again, good evening. Brian O'Connor, Chairman of the Water Pollution Control Authority. It is Thursday, May 30th, 2024. It is now 5:01. I'm calling this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the town engineer report. I invite the town engineer, Mr. John Casey.
I just had one item for this special meeting. That was for the referral of the extension of the sewer on Ornoak Lane from 170 Ornoak Lane to the west toward James Farm Road to the Planning Commission for an 824 review.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we forward the 170 Ornoak Lane to James Farm Road sewer extension to the Planning Commission for an 824 review.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Open up to discussion. Is there any discussion or questions? Mr. Green.
Yep. This was the same project last meeting where we voted against an expansion of it, but this is just extending for the existing permitting. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not for the project specific. It's for the laying of pipe on Ornoak Lane, which pipe would eventually, once it's extended in the future, would serve all the residents on the street.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All in favor, signify by say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Moving right along, we're item number 3, the WPCA plant superintendent report. Mr. Hyde is not with us today. Everybody has gotten the handout and the information regarding the part that needs to be replaced. So I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Woodham.
I request the WPCA Board approve the use of up to $10,000 from account number 389386319 plant maintenance for the repair or replacement of the conveyor plus press screw as required.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. I spoke to the town attorney. He said there's no reports from him, so we can go move past 4 and on to 5, new business. This is in regards to the rate changes. I'm looking for a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the established charges in connection with and the use of the sewerage system for the next fiscal year, establishing a residential rate of 369. Is that a 3 or a 5? I'm sorry. $569.39 per annum for residential, and a commercial rate of $7.13 per 100 cubic yards.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second. Is there any discussion?
Just is, are we going to have clarification of the motion from, are you going to go through?
So what you have in front of you, what you're voting on tonight is the proposed rate increase. The rate increase will cover a current shortfall in the sludge/utilities line of $700,000. It will also cover the already approved infrastructure investment for critical infrastructure projects, which were previously approved by the last WPCA at a value of $14.5 million. The estimated annual cost to repay those projects will be about $1.45 million. That money needs to be incorporated in this year's budget because those projects will be in effect and will be out to bond, so we will have a bill this fiscal year to cover that. That makes the math of the new rate, and I want to just reinforce that the rate has only increased one time in the last 10 years or longer. That'll make the new residential rate $569.39, and the new commercial rate $7.13 per 100 cubic yards. Both of those were further detailed in the previous budget workshop we held about 3 weeks ago, when we talked about the details of the project, and the town engineer spoke about the increased cost at a previous meeting on the project he had, which we have to cover for that now too. So this will make the WPCA financially stable for this year and the out years coming forward. I don't anticipate any reason to come back next year with a rate increase. And this will also allow us to continue to make the infrastructure improvements like you just did today, so that we can keep the plant running smoothly and try to keep operational costs down. It will allow us to keep that flexibility. And that's it. Are there any specific questions tonight? Okay. To the chair.
Ladies first. Ms. Gibson.
All right, through you, Chair. My question is, I mean, I understand the need to do it in advance. I just wanted to know, possibly through you, Chair, to the engineer, if when we're doing the planning, have we considered, and I know this, I feel like it's a budget question because it could increase the budget or maybe rearrange the project, but there's Frash Pond, like, whenever we're protecting that water plant, is this the same project? I'm going to make sure that, is that funding included in that? Is this funding including that project?
This funding is specifically to protect the treatment plant.
Right.
At the intersection of Birdseye Street and
So
Beacon.
in doing that, whatever the structure is or how you're going to do it, is it going to include making sure there's no risk to the communities that are already surrounded by water, and particularly where the Frash Pond is? I don't know the movement of the water or how the bodies of waters are connected, but I just wanted to make sure that the project included the safety for some of the homes that are also on Elm Street too, the marshlands back there. Would that interfere or would it protect it?
No, in fact, we did a study that the protection around the treatment plant would have a negligible impact outside of the plant.
Great, all right, thank you. I just want to make sure we consider that in the budget. Thank you.
Mr. O'Neill?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My question is, and I'll make a statement first. I would love to see the increase a little lower, but my question would be, will there be any impact if we don't, pass this particular number? Is there any?
To answer your question, this is the math for the financial shortfall we have for this year. I see a scenario in which we could potentially be saying, hey, next year the number could be less. My concern with not taking the recommendation now is the incredibly gray area the DEP has laid out for us on making sure we have the proper funding for the PFAS situation which is going on. So I don't like proposing rate increases. I don't like proposing tax increases. Every possibility I've come up with to try to present a scenario in which this number is lower, I've already built into the recommendation. I'm not saying it would have been much higher, but it would have been higher. In this scenario, a couple of variables could come into play, whether the Clean Water Fund gives us their rate, whether the bonding rate actually comes down before we go to bond, and that number would be less. Because our current WPCA fund balance is below the DEP recommendation number right now, it puts us in this unstable gray area. This budget isn't projected to add to the WPCA balance, but it certainly would satisfy the DEP's request that we're addressing the current situation on the ground, the current situation we're facing.
Okay, so if in fact the next year that our bond rating goes down, will we be able to possibly?
To clarify, it's not the bond rating, it'd be the cost to bond money.
Okay.
So like if overall the value of money comes down, I think we're at a 7% interest rate. If that comes down and it's cheaper for us to borrow money, we certainly will take advantage of the lowest rate possible at the time. Right now, this is our projection for a fall bond rating, and that comes from Bond Counsel, and he's pretty spot on. And then he takes into account the market and the Fed rate and all that. I wouldn't like to be in a situation where I don't take his recommendation and that sort of number comes up, and I'm managing from a deficit earlier on.
Thank you.
Mr. Priya?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Casey, thanks for joining us today. Mr. Timiak, I would like to just ask the question, how will the rate increase be communicated to the residents and commercial users?
So when we send out first of all, it'll be probably addressed in a press release, but we do send out the rate bill and we let people know what the rate is this year. It goes via mail to every ratepayer in the town.
Okay. So, my follow-up question to that. When looking at the financial stability, there's a note here that says the WPCA must remain financially solvent and cannot continue to rely on reserve accounts. What role did reserve accounts play in the WPCA's long-term financial strategy in years prior?
So the reserve accounts didn't play a role. They played, I would say they play catch up, right? So if there's a situation which goes on and we're required to go and have an emergency repair, and that emergency repair comes with a large unbudgeted number, it would come out of reserve. In the specific statement which was written, that was based upon the increase from Synagro on the sludge contract, which came as a tremendous surprise. And I can talk about that meeting for the rest of my career because I was so stunned that it was early in July at the beginning of the fiscal year, and the woman was going to every single town to let them know that the number they budgeted for wasn't enough by $500,000. And every town which had a contract with them that year got an increase. So that increase came out of our reserve. And it happens. It happens on the town side. It happens on the Board of Ed side. You have unbudgeted expenses throughout the course of the year. This being an enterprise fund, it's not as easy to have the money go in and out the way it would be to take revenue from the town side if I were to get an extra grant or we were to get a higher dollar amount from a revenue sharing program or something like that. That doesn't exist for the WPCA. If it did, you would have more flexibility and more options, but the reserve account is what's in place. And that's what the DEP is asking for, so that we have the money to cover whatever is going to come down the line with the PFAS they're sort of warning us for.
Thank you. follow-up question. Under bullet 5, benefits to the resident, it says compliance with health and environmental standards. I just wanted to better understand the steps that are being taken to ensure compliance with the health and environmental standards, if you guys could answer that for me.
So in that, we follow all the current laws, whether it's, our MS4 permit. You want to talk about some of that?
Well, specifically, this plan operates under a permit with DEP. And so every month, Tom Hyde reports on the status of the permit compliance, and he reports statistics on treatment levels that he's meeting in accordance with his permit. So we're regulated by the DEP under that permit, and we report, to the DEP if we're not in compliance, which happens, from time to time. But in general, I think Tom reports that we're meeting our permit goals every month.
Okay. And my last question. This goes back to bullet 5, benefits to the residents, prevention of costly emergency repairs in the future. What protocols are in place to handle unexpected financial or operational crisis that we might face?
Well, we'd have to come to the WPCA board for approval. So if there was an emergency, and we would go ahead and fix it to stop the bleeding, but if it's a long-term project, we would have to come back to the board. I know there's some authorization amount we're allowed to fix on the spot, but we would most likely call an emergency meeting to let you know that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Green?
Thank you, through the chair. And thank you, Mr. Timniak and your team for putting together the document, and Dawn, the updated budget to give us this picture. It's obviously not an easy thing to have to consider rate increases, but this all is helpful to clarifying, how the decision we have to make. One of the things I did want to just check in with, as it relates to, especially you mentioned Synagro, and here you mentioned controlling long-term costs. I guess very glad to hear, last meeting, your consideration, probably not for this year, but for next year, of a press to bring down the costs of trucking and shipping to help combat the rising costs of sludge. Are there any other areas that we're also looking at right now to help also either control or avert those costs? It's more a question looking out, obviously, than something for this budget, but something for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, we're always keeping that in mind, and definitely the sludge press is our home run of an idea this year, and we're going to be vetting that 100%. So I anticipate coming back to this body with all of that information for you guys to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Through you, Mr.
Glad.
Chair. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, a rate increase is not something that we like to do to our residents or to our businesses, but in going through all this and the numbers, I think it's clear that we have to ensure that we're working to protect against these emergency situations that might arise, and also these investments, and we're basically paying the interest on the bonds to ensure that our costs are lower later because we have better operating equipment, hopefully more efficient equipment. We can get rid of some sludge and do that. And then, I would implore, they're not here, but our state and federal representatives to find ways to control some of those costs and help these towns, because we're not the only ones facing that. And it's just yet another unfunded mandate that we get to deal with these things. So. And unfortunately, we'll have to look at this rate and right now, and hopefully, like you said, some of these things that we will do today will allow us to lower the rates in the future, and our costs will also go down.
So to that, and I know part of the conversation back when these projects were previously approved, I know it's like it stinks that the bill comes due today, but could you imagine the cost of the cleanup of the WPCA if it flooded over? So shoring up and raising it and securing that was exactly what the council or the WPCA board when they made their decision to do that, and you know, it's time, it's due. And I mean, that would be a bill, that'd be an emergency meeting, of course. So I'm happy that we're ahead of it. I'm happy that it's in the permitting stages. I'm happy that it's going to be done, so we don't have to worry about that.
Bringing that up, I had visited, through you, Chair, a few of the families on Elm Street where sewage comes through. They smell it and things like that. Will that alleviate, do you think that work will that alleviate the spillover that was happening?
When you say spill, you mean odor?
On Elm Street,
Oh.
there's a few homes that are like right on the marsh.
Yeah. Well, I would say probably not. It's not going to be that tall where it's going to affect the flow of air, you know, so if the air is you know, if the,
I think they feel like there was, it's not just air. I think it's in the water too, but I don't know. You know, I don't know. They're not the specialist. They just smell it, so.
and the residents have wetlands behind them,
Right.
actually, so the wetlands have an organic smell as well, so, you know,
Right, I thought I could just
it gets
ask.
the sources of the odor might be different, but regardless, if the wind is kind of blowing in your direction.
Okay.
it's-
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, just
Mr.
real quick,
Llewellyn?
through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Timniak, you mentioned before the possibility of there being some cost mitigation for this via Clean Water Fund programs or anything else coming from the EPA. Is there anything on the radar screen that you're aware of, or is this more of like a hope, wishful kind of thing?
It's more of a hope wishful. We're going to ask again, and if their bucket of money is not spent down, they may look at the project again. But we already are receiving some money on this, so I hope to get more. And any change we get in new money will certainly affect the amount we actually bond for. And that will be updated for everybody to see. And I mean, that'll most likely come with you guys having to approve another grant.
Thank you, Mr. Timniak.
Are there any other questions or discussion? We're going to put it to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Unanimous.
I just want to clarify for the record that the rate increase is correspondent with the budget sheets you received, the updated budget sheets, which will be updated in the overall budget, Carol. So I just want that to be clarified.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous.